Hi, this is Gabe from FluentForever.com. In these 3 videos, I'm going to show you the bare essentials of Spanish phonetics and spelling for Latin American Spanish, specifically the Central Mexican dialect, since that tends to be what you're going to hear if you're listening to Latin American TV novelas, dub movies, etc. If you're using one of my pronunciation trainers, don't worry about memorizing this stuff. The trainer will do that for you. Just watch and pay attention. Everything you see here will show up sooner or later within the trainer. I'll be going through Spanish using the International Phonetic Alphabet, or IPA. This lets us simplify our discussion a lot, since I only need to talk about 30 symbols or so, many of which you know already, instead of trying to wade through nearly 130 spelling rules. So, that being said, let's get started. We'll break this discussion up into 3 parts. The first will cover the Spanish consonants, the second, the vowels, and the third will cover a few of Spanish's spelling rules. Now, Latin American Spanish has 25 consonants, and if you speak English, 13 of these are relatively familiar sounds and familiar symbols. 6 are relatively familiar sounds with unfamiliar symbols, and 6 more are really new. Since I don't currently speak Spanish, I have a native speaker here, Christina.
Hello.
Who will be helping for this video. We'll be starting with 8 really straightforward sounds and symbols.
There's B as in bruja, F as in foca, G as in gallo, M as in mango, N as in nabo, S as in sirena, Z as in esmeralda, and W as in huerta.
Next, we have 5 familiar symbols that sound a little different than what you're used to. We'll start with what looks like a D and a T.
There's D as in daga and T as in teléfono. If you're comparing these consonants in English and Spanish, you can say D and D.
If you pay close attention, you'll notice that in English, the very tip of your tongue hits the alveolar ridge, that ridge right behind your front upper teeth. D. But in Spanish, the tip of your tongue flattens out a bit, so that the tip of your tongue actually touches your upper teeth and the blade of your tongue, that part right behind the tip, touches your alveolar ridge.
This gives you a less percussive sound. You get D instead of D. It's exactly the same for Spanish's T. Instead of T, you get D. And that puff of air you get when you say t, t, T is also gone. T, t, D.
Let's move on to 2 more consonants that don't have big puffs of air in Spanish.
We have P as in pavo and K as in capa.
For both of these consonants, the difference between English and Spanish is all about that puff of air.
In English, there's peace, P, peace, and in Spanish, there's peace, P, peace. Same with K in English. We have ki, K, ki, and in Spanish, ki, K, aquí.
The last of the slightly modified consonants in Spanish is L.
L as in lata.
It's a familiar symbol in IPA, a lowercase l, but it sounds a bit different than in English. In English, when we say a word like lease, the back and front of your tongue both will come up towards the roof of your mouth. Lease. But in Spanish, only the tip of your tongue comes up, and it reaches just behind your front upper teeth.
Lis. English has lis, Spanish, lis.
Next, we're going to cover 6 new symbols with mostly familiar sounds.
The symbol, which looks like a lowercase j, is Spanish's y, as in yuca, or English's u.
Now, what complicates this story is that there is another version of this symbol, which looks like a J with a little curly tail at the end. That sound is basically the familiar English y sound, with a bit more grit to it.
Y, as in yuca.
The middle of the tongue is right next to the roof of the mouth.
Y, yuca. Or it may even touch the roof of the mouth for a second, producing y, yuca, inyección.
Depending upon the word, the dialect, the speaker, and even who they're talking to, you'll hear speakers switch between these various y sounds almost randomly. So get used to hearing all of them. Next up, we have 2 more symbols that are really familiar sounds.
There's as in Spanish's banca, or English's bank.
This is an N produced with the back of the tongue instead of with the front.
And there's ch, as in Spanish's chancleta, or English's cheese.
It's actually two sounds stuck together in this case. It's a t and a sh. Ch.
Last, we have Spanish's v as in hada.
This is actually the same symbol used in English's th sound, as in this or thy. The Spanish version is basically the same. Your vocal cords are buzzing, your tongue is right at your upper teeth. The only difference is that the Spanish sound is a little bit lighter.
The tongue isn't pressed as hard against the teeth, so you get sounds like CD instead of CD. CD, CD.
At this point, we've covered most of the Spanish consonants. We have 6 of them left, which will be entirely new for most English speakers. First, let's deal with the 2 Spanish R's. The first of these is usually the hardest one to pronounce. It uses the familiar-looking lowercase r as its symbol, and it's known as the trilled R.
It sounds like r as in burro.
For this consonant, your tongue goes right up against your alveolar ridge. It softens a bit to allow air to come through, and as that air comes through, it will vibrate your tongue up and down against that ridge. There are a lot of tricks to producing this consonant, which you can find all over YouTube. The best one I've heard for producing this is to think the phrase Prince of Prussia while you are saying Prince of Prussia. You replace those R's with D's. And then you kind of play around until your tongue starts to cooperate. Prince of Prussia, Prince of Prussia, Prince of Prussia, Prince of Prussia. This can take weeks or months. The thing can be kind of a pain to get right. Anyway, our next consonant, the tapped R, is usually comparatively easy to pronounce. The symbol is a sort of tiny rounded off R-looking curve, and it is very easy to mistake for the trilled R symbol. You're mostly looking to see if there's a little line on the top left or not. If there's a line sticking up, it's the trilled R, and if not,
it's r as in aro.
You know how the trilled R let your tongue flap up and down a bunch of times against your alveolar ridge? Well, this one flaps up and down just one time. It's basically a super fast D. And it's usually the first thing you get when you do that Prince of Prussia thing. Prince of Prussia.
Next up, we have Spanish's v as in cubo.
This one looks like a capital B with a tail on it. And it sounds a lot like a combination of a B and a V because that's basically what it is. It's made by bringing both of your lips close together, but instead of closing them completely to form a B, aba, you let a little bit of air through it and make v, ava.
A similar thing happens with Spanish's l as in soga.
The symbol looks like a V with a kind of curly Q underneath, and it's produced in a similar way to a hard G sound, g, g, which is generally made by bringing your tongue all the way up in the back and closing off the flow of air, g, g. But for this consonant, instead of closing off the flow of air completely, you'll let a little bit of air through, and you get
l, soga, agua.
Now let's stay at the same spot, where your tongue is up at the back right where you pronounce G and K. If you let air through in the exact same way, but you don't engage your vocal cords, there's no buzzing going down on your throat, then you'll get what looks like a lowercase x.
As in Mexico, gelatina, and girasol.
Last but not least, we have
Ñ as in niños.
It's written like a combination of a lowercase n and j, and the International Phonetic Association chose that symbol for a reason. If you recall from earlier, the lowercase j symbol was y, as in English's you or yawn. And for that consonant, the middle of your tongue raised up towards the roof of your mouth. Y. For this consonant, it's the same motion, but the middle of your tongue doesn't just move towards the roof of your mouth, it actually touches it, stopping the airflow and forcing the air to come out of your nose. Ny, ny. You get this quick y sound at the end just as soon as your tongue moves on to produce the next vowel.
Niños.
And that's it for the Spanish consonants. To quickly review, we had 8 familiar consonants with familiar symbols.
B as in bruja. F as in foca. G as in gallo. M as in mango. N as in nabo. S as in sirena. Z as in esmeralda. And U as in huerta.
We had 5 familiar symbols with slight modifications from English.
D as in daga.
Pronounced with the tip of the tongue against the teeth.
T as in teléfono.
pronounced in the same way, without a big puff of air.
P as in pavo, and K as in capa,
Also without big puffs of air.
and L as in lata.
Pronounced only with the front of your tongue. Then came 5 mostly familiar sounds with new symbols.
There's Y as in yuca, or if you're going to make it more gritty, you can also say Y as in yuca, or even Y as in yuca. N as in Spanish is banca.
This is an N produced with the back of the tongue instead of with the front.
Ch as in Spanish is chancleta, and V as in hada.
Then came 6 entirely new sounds. The trilled R,
R as in burro,
the tapped R,
R as in aro, V as in cubo,
which is basically a V made with both lips,
R as in soga,
made in the same place as G or a K, but in allowing a bit more air through,
H as in Mexico,
made in that exact same place, but without any buzzing from your vocal cords,
and Ñ as in niños.
an N made using the middle of your tongue against the roof of your mouth. And that is it for Spanish's consonants. Next up, vowels.